Okay, in this video I will show you how you can create a specific website. I created one for an NFT community and I will show you step by step how it's done. The first thing you should do is to go here on your website and then under options, and then you can change an HTTP link to an HTTPS link if you followed the previous videos and therefore have a certificate which enables HTTPS. You want to change the link as well. Okay, coming to the website. So we are using Gutenberg 2022 editor, the Gutenberg editor, and therefore we can simply use blocks to create a website. These blocks can be used to create different template parts, which we can then reuse for different pages we have. So this is not a one-pager anymore, but has actually 3 pages. We simply open them up. And for example, this page and this page has the exact same layout, and this is what we can determine in the Gutenberg editor. How do we do that? We simply click on our web page and then we click on pages. And then we have 2 options which are quite important. We can edit a website to actually edit the content, and another important option is the quick edit function, and there we can use different templates which then can be seen and be used for the website, especially for the page we are using. Now we know we are using the page, no separators, and then we can actually go for this template. So when you want to use the Gutenberg editor, you have to click on Edit Site, and then we can click on this, and there we have template and template parts. We click on templates, we go on page no separators, click on it, and then we simply have the layout for a page. And I made this quite simple. I made a group and then I put in a header, and beneath that we have the post title, which is this thing here. Then we have a cover, and on top of the cover is the content we are using. So for the cover image, I have the same image as on the normal pages. It's like this cover, this is like the background, and on top is the content. And you should really use this post content, because what we could have edited on, for example, when we edit this specific site, then we are simply just editing the content. That could have been seen just a moment. I'll show you. When you edit a site, this is the thing that will be put in edit content. Okay, so we now know that, for example, pages use templates as well as template parts, and we can modify them. For example, we could say page no separator should use a different header. Then we would have to select the header, and then we could replace it with another header. And what might be quite interesting, for example, if you want to add a block and click on a plus sign, then you can actually use patterns that were created by other people and simply reuse them. If you like the looks, then you have a sufficient layout where you can go with. You simply use them, and then you click on this on the list view and can determine how it's structured, can learn from it, how other people structure their content so it looks nice, and can adapt and learn from it, and so on. So easily, if we want to add a block, we simply click on the plus sign, edit what we like, and so on. Okay, so for example, what I did here, I had a cover, as I said. Then I have an image, and At this moment it is this image, as you can see, and then on top I have the post content, which means that the cover's in the background. I fixed the background, so it's in a steady position, as you could see on the main page, and it's not repeated. What would it change if you repeat it? For example, if the image is smaller, then this area, the image is as repeated as often to fill the area as necessary. Okay, and then you could put on an overlay. I usually put on white as a color because sometimes the overlay is gray, and then put the opacity to 0. Also, you could add a padding for every side, but I recommend usually to use classes to add, if you want to add something, margins, because these paddings come in pixels and you want your website to be responsive, which means that it looks quite nice on tablets, laptops and phones, and if you use pixels this could be very messed up. So therefore I always recommend using margins with %. Okay, so we'll go to the main page and then I will talk you through how I did everything. Okay, edit site. So first I modified the header. We click on list view again so we can see the structure. So it is a group, and then we have a header in the group. We have a spacer on top, so you can see the image clearly, the site logo, then the site title, site tagline, and an image beneath. If this image should be full width, you can't put it in a group. You have to put it above it or beneath it, but the group usually works like you have the group and it always has a margin on the left and on the right side, and things in a group can't be full width. And then beneath the image we have a spacer. Yeah, we could actually delete this one. Anyway, so the main page, we can quickly look at it. So the main page has as well this background, and it's achieved by simply having a cover, and on top of the cover we have everything else, which means we have 3 groups. I was simply too lazy to make one single group, but it also works like this. We have simply put in all the 3 groups into one group and put it on top of the cover. So the cover is in the background and on top is the content. And therefore you can also see that we have a distance between this background cover and the content on top. And we achieve that by actually creating our own custom CSS. How can we do that? Pretty simple. We use plugins, and there we use custom CSS, simple custom CSS, and then we go under appearance, and under custom CSS, and there we simply define a class, point centered, brackets open, put in these 2 things, margin left, margin right. You can modify the percentages, and then we remember it's called centered. Then we go back and then we click on the main group, and here we click on settings and advanced, and then it was a CSS class we defined, so we put in centered, and tada, we have a distance between the cover and the content. On the other pages we don't need it, there it's automatically involved that we have a little spacing between this. Okay. So basically we just have to add this CSS class to the group where we put in every other group, and the other groups are simply content summaries, I would say. Okay. So we will dig in further. We go to the top and I will quickly talk. So we have a page overview. This is nothing else than a heading. What you should do for a good structure of the page is use every kind of heading, which means H1 to H6, but you don't have to use every kind of these headings. You could also simply use, for example, H1 to H4, but you shouldn't skip a heading class. For example, you shouldn't use H1 headings and then H3 headings, but use if you use an H1 heading and you would like to use a heading which is smaller, then you should go for the H2 and not for the H3, because you want to actually optimize your website in accordance to search engine results, and therefore you should structure your page well and use also a good meta description, but I will come to that later. So we have different blocks, that is important. So we could add a heading, this is a heading, and then this is a paragraph. After you put in a heading, you can quickly click enter, and then automatically it will be a paragraph, just for speed purposes. Okay, and then we can see here, I'll quickly show you, in the list view, you should use this a lot actually, that this is a paragraph. Now, why is it like this? Why is it blue? Well, we can go here for styles and under typography, and then we see links on blue. So this is no text, this is actually a link. And somehow it is linked. And we have this sign and a first. So what does it mean? Page description. So if we would click on this, we would land here. Why do we land here? So we click simply on the heading, click on settings, click on advanced, and then we see an HTML anchor, which is first. So what we are doing with this is actually giving this section, like this heading, an ID. And if we would like to link this heading, so we can actually go to this heading from another place, then we simply need to use the anchor, which we use because we use this sign and then first. We need to use this sign first so we can actually refer to the ID and nothing else. Otherwise, it would think that we would actually link to a web page, which we don't want. And another neat thing you can see is that we can actually toggle on the option open a new tab. This is especially useful if you have something that adds something to the page, which is always additional content. For example, on this web page, a glossary for important words and phrases, and which shouldn't neglect the option to actually visit the page and read it through. So additional information, you can open it in a new tab. Okay, so that's about it. These paragraphs are all structured like this, and they refer to different kind of IDs of different headings on the page. And when you click on these, I'll simply show you. Something happens. We scroll. And then sometimes we have something like this, like another link, and we click on it and something happens again. So if you don't do anything, the thing which would happen is actually the page reloads at the specific point, and this is something we don't want. So how can we accomplish the smooth scroll animation? Well, that's another plugin. In general, I recommend that you use as few plugins as possible, because they actually make your theme heavier, and this is something you don't want. You want to have your theme as light as possible, and therefore your page very lean and clean and small concerning to space, and every additional functionality you should always look for possible solution like custom CSS. I will show you in a few minutes a very nice thing we simply programmed with a few lines of code. You could install a plugin for this, but you have to keep in mind the creators of these plugins don't work with each other, so they are independently working, and you have a lot of compatibility problems because every plugin creator has to ensure that his plugin works with the current version of WordPress and so on and so on. And then you have sometimes multiple plugins which have similar functions or share something in functionality, and this causes a lot of problems and it makes your web page heavier and heavier. It will kind of decrease the efficiency of the loading speed and so on and so on. So always keep your page as lean as possible and use as few plugins as possible. Functionality should be added only when it's really needed, and if it's added, you should always look for a solution with code because it's much leaner to have, for example, 10 lines of code of CSS than a complete plugin which has JavaScript functionality and so on and so on. How can we enable the scroll animation? Probably we could program something, but we simply use this plugin, page scroll to ID. So when we install this plugin, we have simply something like this. You can look on it, and we simply have to activate it and it works. I didn't look into this further. So always when you install a plugin, you have to activate it as well, and then it works. Okay, going back to the main page. And the reason why we don't have like the distance here when we look at it from here to here is simply because in this edit mode, the editor is not loading the additional CSS class we apply to the group. This main group here, which the margins on the left and on the right side. Okay, so we understood how the links are created, how the headings works, how to scroll to a specific part, and so on. Okay, then we have a paragraph, another heading, and now comes something interesting. Actually, we have a special image here. So I can quickly show you why it's special. We hover over it, and then it activates kind of color mode and something else. It's actually a link to the official explanation of this person, like Satoshi, on Twitter, about his NFT collection, the MFers. So quite interesting. So how did we do that? Well, without a plugin. So we go back to simple CSS, and there we programmed something. We enabled grayscale, and you don't really have to understand every line of code. What is important that you understand how to modify it. So for example, opacity stands for the opacity, obviously, so you can actually play with these variables, as well as the transition duration. The transition duration is the time it takes till the color effect will be shown. Okay, so quite neat. We can actually modify this, and as you can see, just a few lines of code. And then we simply have here, we go on the list view and look what we have. So we added columns, 50-50. On the left side, we simply put in a paragraph. And you can also see when you click on these different things, like for example, the column, you can align it differently, for example, top or in the middle. This one is in the middle, for example. And then you can add into a column simply an image, and we added an image. And then we linked the image to something. So you can usually apply this to many elements. Simply apply a link, and then we combined the link with the CSS class. And here you can see something else. So these page builders usually offer the option that you can actually apply different effects for different elements, but in the background something happens. So there's actually a built-in CSS class on this editor, which will be activated if you apply the possibility to the image that it's round. So we can simply do that. we go for image, then we go to the media library, then we select this one, and then we simply click on rounded, and then you can see this appears. Okay, and when we change it back, it's still default. It goes back. Okay, so we can see how this page builder actually works. Quite neat. Okay. Then we have a heading, a paragraph. Then we simply can also determine how long the link will be. We can simply just select the word and then link it, as we've done. This is for the rarity table. Then we have a paragraph, simply print it bold, so it's better readable. Paragraph, then we have two columns again, left side this image, right side this image. And for the images, it's quite important that we actually use an alt text, an alternative text. Another thing I would recommend that you first select all the images you need for your website, and then that you actually name them well. You can go under media, and then we see all the images, and you can see these actually have proper names. For example, Murphy Silver Chain. And then we implement the alternative text on the main page, but you can also edit the alternative text simply on the images. For example, here, Rare Trade Zombie. So this is quite important. Why is it important? Because you should have sufficient metadata that search engines can read. You have to imagine search engines work differently than humans, and they're using the metadata to understand how your page works, how it's structured, which names are important, and so on. So you should make it as easy as possible for the search engines to understand the content of your web page, how it's structured, and how it should work with it, and to which people it should recommend it to. And this stays true for many things. For example, we click on a plugin we just installed for this purpose. Click on SEO in general, and then features. Search appearance is the right thing, I believe. Okay, and there we can see that we, for example, implemented a meta description for the website and tried to optimize it. This is something we could have also seen when we click on pages. Where is it? Yeah. And then edit. Okay, then this plugin, which is quite important, Yoast SEO, that you can see here how it's built and how a user can see it that actually is interested in the page. So we have an SEO title and a slug and a meta description. And these meta descriptions are quite important. And this plugin is giving you proper feedback to actually optimize the meta descriptions and the metadata of your web page. Okay, going back. So we have paragraphs, then we simply implemented a list, because why not? Columns, paragraphs, headings. You can see this usually repeats, like it's not so specific. Then we have columns again, but this time in a different order, because when you, for example, add columns, then you have the option between different layouts. And no, we simply have two columns here with 50-50, and then within these columns we simply have two columns again. So you can actually add into 50-50 columns, again 50-50 columns, so therefore then you have 4 equally big pictures you can add. So quite interesting that you can actually implement modifications into modifications. We can simply show this. We go to columns, 50-50, then we click on this, go, why is it? click 50/50, and there you have it. So with the pre-installed options, you can actually create a lot of diversity for these kind of things. So all columns and images inside. Paragraphs, columns, images inside, and so on. And then we have something different. We have a table, and then we can add in tables. And what you can see here, that actually other people made predefined layouts for this element. So quite neat. So we could actually use this, because why not? Actually, it doesn't look so bad. And then you can actually obviously analyze how this kind of thing works. Select it somewhere. Okay, and then you can see here how it works. Pretty neat. So columns into columns, and then separators, headings, paragraphs, buttons. So you could use this, or you could simply use this to understand how it works and create your own layout. And when you create tables, I simply use 2 and 2, you can implement images. This is quite important. As you can see here, we have an image, and we have to click on this arrow, and then we can implement inline code, an image, or whatever you would like. So we will simply delete the table again, but it was important that you see that you have actually many options there. And you can also modify the table layout. You can always add another row or another column, and other things, for example, how big column or row should be, and so on. So you have many options to actually modify this. Okay. Then after this table we have links, and these links now this time really refer actually to web pages, and therefore we don't use the hashtag, but simply the link. And these are paragraphs again. Okay. And here you can see we actually implement the GIF. And what is important here, that a GIF works equally as an image, so you don't have to worry at all. You simply click add an image, and then you simply select the GIF, and the GIF works automatically. So actually nothing you have to learn for that. To GIFs. Okay, and when you watch closely, you see that we have something specific, and this is this back to top. So when we click on this button, we can directly scroll to the top. Okay, this is again another plugin, but I believe that you could easily program something like this, because what is it? It's actually an image which is placed on top of everything else. So you should simply learn how you can implement it. So it's placed on top of everything else, and then give it a fixed location, like the background is fixed as well. The cover here, what you can see. So this should have a fixed location, so it doesn't change its location. And when it's a fixed location, then you simply have to link the image where it should go. And this is either something in this area, or for our case, it's simply this. So we gave this an HTML anchor again, which is 0. And then this plugin simply leads us to the 0. And this plugin is called, you could use probably many plugins which do all the same. Just a moment. WP front to top. Okay, then you have to click on settings. It's enabled, and what's important is that you scroll to element and you can see 0. So hashtag for internal, and then 0 for the heading we gave the HTML anchor to. Perfect, now we understood that. Then I simply click on the pages, which might provide additional content, but I believe there's nothing to see. Okay. Here we simply linked to the main page, so we use the paragraph and then simply implemented the link of the main page, and then we can click on it and get redirected to the main page. The same on here, and as you can see, it opens in a new tab. So here we will quickly analyze how good our website actually is in terms of SEO functionality and search results and so on, readability, metadata, and so on. So you can see here I actually optimized quite a lot for good metadata, and we have okayish page quality, a good page structure, a good link structure, a good server, and external factors. And how you would like to go for this topic is simply you go to the section and then you read what's written there, and then you simply Google it or ask someone who's more competent than you to answer this question if you have a question, because this is how you learn. You should first always, when there's something written, try to actually implement the improvements, and if it doesn't work, you can still ask someone or search. Being a developer or designer, whatever, is mainly about answering the right questions so you can find the answers on your own. At some point, you will then learn how you can actually integrate these improvements and code them by yourself, but this is something you won't need in your first time. It took me a long time to create this web page, and you can see we have actually quite good results overall, like 85%. This is quite good, especially because the external factors are about links. So how often is the page linked on other websites? These are actually called backlinks, and some people on Fiverr and other platforms actually offer them. So people are actually able to click on these links to find your web page, and people are taking money to make these backlinks. Very popular method to integrate backlinks was to create a very solution-oriented web page and then simply go to forums and add these links to your website on these forums, where actually people could gather help and solutions from the web page that was linked. So backlinks without a lot of context and use case are not so good anyway. Okay, and then we have other things like Facebook popularity and so on. And because I didn't care about this so far, this simply has so many points, but I tried to optimize as many things as possible so you could have a good experience and understanding that I did quite a lot for this website, so it could have a good result, and that it's quite possible to have, for example, meta information at 100%. And here you can usually see how important a certain aspect is, and then you can see the comments and how they are described with green marks or red marks. And usually lots of things are written there, and you should really use this as your first step to understanding what is important and how to improve your web page. And simply try to optimize your SEO ranking. Okay, for example, a negative aspect is that we have many JavaScripts, so maybe we used too many plugins. And yeah, so this is a point we could tackle. For example, the scroll to top button, we could try to simply write our own code so we can actually kick the plugin out of our plugin page. And collection, this would be probably quite useful. Okay, then we go to plugins, and I will talk a little bit about the plugins. So we have the anti-spam bee, and this is quite good to avoid spam. We have the Phoenix Media rename, but this is not important, so we delete it. this was a plugin to actually rename images when they're actually uploaded on the website, but I recommend to actually delete all the images of your media library which are not properly named, and then simply re-upload them with a proper name. This will take you much less effort and is quicker and more efficient, and then you have less problems with bad linking, I would say. Then we have WP Server Security, Anti-Spam Malware Scan. I only install this for limited login attempts. The rest I don't care about. Maybe it helps, maybe it doesn't help. I don't care. The limited login attempts are quite useful if you want to avoid that your website gets hacked, because a brute force where someone simply uses tons of combinations of letters and numbers for your admin password and lots of different combinations for your password can be easily used against you if you don't have limited login attempts. And as an account name, you should never use the account name admin. This will lead to trouble, because then the attacker only needs to use lots of different combinations for the password. Okay, this is installed, pre-installed, so I didn't install that, but maybe it helps with something, I don't know. Then we have WP Optimize, Clean Compressed Cache. This is quite useful because, for example, if you change something on your web page, a revision gets created. So that means that you can take the change back, and all these revisions are actually saved on your website. And this will make your website slower, and you don't want that. So we click on WP Optimize on Database, and then you can see we can optimize lots of tables and then clean all post revisions, which is quite useful, and we should do this kind of stuff on a regular basis to keep our page clean and as fast as possible. Okay, now you should understand how this website works. If you have any further questions, for example, I don't know, whatever, how to create the images, how to modify different kind of elements, how this exactly works with the cover, and so on, simply let me know in the comments, or simply write me a kind direct message on Twitter, and I will try, if there's enough interest, to simply make a video where I answer this for many people. Or if it's a question that only you have, I will simply leave you a response if it's possible and if I know the answer. But I guess most things should be self-explanatory. Yeah, and I hope you good luck using this, and I would be happy if you would actually use this knowledge to build something you would like to build for others, for yourself, or whatever, and enjoy simply the journey. And as you can see, it's not so complicated with the modern solutions, and you simply have to understand how it's done and consider a few different aspects. But if you do this, it's actually a quite fast process of creating a website like this. And many people, for example, offer to create websites for others, and they use WordPress for many, many reasons, and they take lots of money for that. So if you would like to improve your skills on this, it could be quite useful as a freelancer, for example, or for the company of your family or whatever. Feel free to use this knowledge however you like.